know, 1-2 years old when that song kind of hit, so it's been a while, and she's 12 moving to 13 right now, and she looked like Boo from Monsters, Inc., because we would put 2 pigtails in her hair, and she had dark, big brown eyes and the dark hair, and she would sing, "How great is our God," and she put her hands up, so that when I hear that song, it's a good Mother's Day song for me, because I remember that memory as a new mom. That was a fun one. There's not always fun ones, but that was a fun one, and I kind of wanted to give a shout out. We don't always do this, but, you know, one of our lead worshipers, Joel, and his wife were on HGTV, so if you didn't know that, you need to go look it up on House Hunters. I don't have cable, so I haven't seen it, to be really truthful. I'm going to have to, YouTube it or something, but if you see Joel, pester him about how Hollywood they are, coming out from California, showing us all this big fancy stuff from Hollywood, but I think that'd be fun for you to get to see, so I just wanted you guys to know that. Wanted to jump right in. It is Mother's Day. I don't always get to speak, but sometimes I do. My husband's the lead pastor, if you don't know me, and I'm Amanda, and I am excited to get to share what I believe God has for us today. And our series in May is Grow, and so we're going to continue that. We're going to touch a little bit about mothers, but really we're just going to talk about what it looks like as a follower of God to grow. And I was thinking about this fun idea, and I think we only have one projector working, so if you have to move around to see something, I'm not going to judge, so just do that. But I have some pictures that I wanted to show that are kind of funny. This guy, his name's Adam Savage. I don't know if you know him. He's on the show Mythbusters, speaking of Hollywood. And he's kind of a cool guy, I think, based on how he is on Mythbusters. Does anybody know who he is? You guys kind of have it? Okay, good. Because they both kind of look the same to me. I don't know. The Mythbusters guys, I'm I don't know which one's which. But so basically, he will go to Comic-Con, and he wants to experience it as a fan. So he goes completely costumed so that people can't recognize him. And it's created some fun stories over the years of him doing it. So I kind of wanted to show you some of the pictures that he's done. So this is him being Kylo Ren. You don't know that's him. This little girl doesn't know that's him. But she's getting a picture not just with Kylo Ren. She's getting a picture with Adam Savage. Let's do the next picture. Like I said, move around. It's okay if you have to move around to see it. This guy is really funny. Now, I haven't seen the movie, so, but there's a movie, Revenant. I guess it has Leo DiCaprio. This is a bear that killed Leo DiCaprio. So Adam Savage dressed up like the bear that killed Leo DiCaprio. And I guess if you can see, that face is like a guy he's dragging like a dummy with Leo DiCaprio's face on it. So that's one of the things that he dressed up. And then this is my favorite. This is him with Alton Brown. He and Alton are friends, I guess. And they hang out, and they went as the twins from Matrix. And there's tons of pictures of people taking pics with them, and they have no idea that they're with Alton Brown from Food Network, right? And Adam Savage from Mythbusters. And I thought, that's really funny, And we kind of reflect back on last week when Blake was talking about Jacob wrestling with God, but at first he doesn't really know it's God, it's this man. And that happens sometimes in the Old Testament, where all of a sudden we realize this person that one of these characters we hear about is interacting with somebody. We think it's a person, maybe it's an angel, and then all of a sudden, boom, the scriptures tell us, no, this is God. It's like God unawares, like Adam Savage unawares, God unawares. We're kind of, it's God. So we're going to jump in chapter 18 of Genesis, and we're going to pick up a story similar to last week, where God comes down in a human body before Jesus Christ walked the earth. And we're going to start right in verse 1. And I love verse 1 because, unlike last week, it's kind of our spoiler alert for the story, because it's going to tell you, hey, that's Adam Savage, okay? It's going to tell you, hey, this is a story about when God appeared to Abraham. So it kind of puts that in your brain. So it's kind of like the end of the story, and then we're going to jump into how we know that and all that. So here we go, verse 1. You guys ready? The Lord appeared to Abraham near the great trees of Mamre while he was sitting at the entrance. See, it's Mamre because it's Mom's Day. Sitting at the entrance to his tent in the heat of the day. So right away we hear, the Lord appeared to Abraham. So we know this is going to be the Lord. But you don't really get that right away, if you're Abraham, see, that's the cool part about having the scriptures, because now we know Abraham didn't have that yet. So we're going to keep going. Verse 2. Abraham looked up and saw 3 men standing nearby. When he saw them, he hurried from the entrance of his tent to meet them and bowed low to the ground. Now remember, this is going to be a nomadic society. They're going to be living in tents, traveling, staying put for a while. But imagine how exciting it would be to see people. I think it would be like, woo, okay, great. We've got something to do. We're going to hear news about what's going on in the realm where they've traveled. And so that's kind of, Abraham sees them as like, he bows low to the ground. He said, verse 3, if I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, do not pass your servant by. Let a little water be brought, and then you may all wash your feet and rest under this tree. Let me get you something to eat so you can be refreshed and then go on your way now that you have come to your servant. Very well, they answered, do as you say. And so we immediately kind of understand we're in the presence of the Lord. Abraham doesn't know that yet. So what does Abraham do in this space? Now, look, we're sitting in church. We believe as a church that God is everywhere, right? God is omnipresent. That's the fancy word to say God is everywhere. And so he's here. Before we got here, he was already here. When you get home, he's already going to be there. If you're going out to eat, God bless you. Even though the lines will be long, he will be there. If you're out on the street, God is there. So he's always around us. But how do I connect with this presence? How do I experience his presence? And so we begin to see Abraham interacting with this presence, the presence of God. How does he do that? He immediately is hosting strangers. And that's really interesting. I think the word host to me, for some reason, is a little archaic because I'm not Martha Stewart, so I don't use that word a lot, host. But what does that really look like? We're going to come and see in the next few verses. It's basically serving these strangers. So let's keep reading. Verse 6. So Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah. Quick, he said, get 3 seahs of fine flour and knead it and bake some bread. Then he ran to the herd and selected a choice tender calf and gave it to the servant who hurried to prepare it. He then brought some curds and milk and the calf that had been prepared and set these before them. While they ate, he stood near them under a tree. We already kind of got the key word over and over again. He said, I'm your servant if your servant has found favor. So we see this word serve. We understand he's hosting people. What does hosting look like? It looks like serving. First, he changed his plans to serve, right? Because he's hurrying around, changing what his day was going to look like. He changed. Second, then he included others. He got Sarah involved. She's making bread. He got the servant involved, making the calf. It's including others. And then third, it involved his resources. Boy, that's what serving looks like. That's what serving looks like. Serving looks like, hey, changing your schedule to host others, to serve others. It looks like involving your resources, and it looks like including others. When we're talking about spiritual disciplines on how to grow, today's is serving. And it's really a cool thing on Mother's Day because mothers get this. We serve our kids all the time. But let's look at serving the others. Let's look at serving, as Abraham did, strangers. Let's look at what it looks like even to serve within our body. How do we do that? That's how we interact with the presence of the Lord. It's another spiritual discipline. It's another way we grow. Okay? So we're going to keep going into scriptures. Let's back up to verse 8. It was the last one we read, and that last line, which I love, and you can't see, so that's a bummer. The last line, he stood near them under a tree. He's in the presence of the Lord. It hasn't been revealed to him yet, just so you know. But he's serving others, and he stands near them. There's a proximity. There's an intimacy. There's, the word we say at Radius a lot, relationship. There's closeness. That's how you really serve people, is you're not afraid to stand near them. You're not afraid to get in their lives. That's what real relationship looks like. And Abraham, we see him doing that. It kind of reminds me of a story in Luke chapter 10, where Mary, so now we're in New Testament thinking, where Mary and Martha are hosting, there's that word again, they're serving a group of people in their home. One of them is this master teacher named Jesus. They're serving him, and they're running around. You can imagine what that looked like. I mean, it was a hullabaloo of just serving and dishes and clay pots, I guess, and water and all those things. And all of a sudden, the teacher begins to talk, and Mary, in our mind's eye, in our imagination, immediately is like, if he's talking, I'm sitting. And she comes near and sits at his feet. And Jesus has this moment, because Martha doesn't do that. Martha's like, oh, we ain't done. We got to keep working. There's still more to do. And so she's still busy. And Jesus turns to Martha when Martha begins to complain. And she says, I think it's in Luke 10, I believe we have this, Luke 10, verse 41 and 42, Brent. Okay, good. We're just going to skip down. Few things are needed, indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken from her. The phrase I want you to see is, only one thing is needed. Only one thing is needed. And back in our story in Genesis, Abraham's doing it. He's standing near. He's in the presence. He's inviting relationship. When we serve, we can't be Marthas. Abraham could have set everything in motion and been busy doing. He's like, no, man, this is about you. I want to serve you. Remember, this is the Lord. He doesn't know that, but we know that. In fact, if we continue in the New Testament, we're going to see, I think it's in Matthew 25, the passage 35 through 40, and I'm not going to read it. I'm just going to summarize. It's Jesus talking again, and they said, hey, when did we give you water? When did we give you food? And Jesus said, when you did it to the least of these, it was like you were serving me. So this is kind of confirmed what Abraham is doing. Abraham is giving to others, and it's like he's doing it for God, except for him it really is, but we're the only ones who know this so far. But now we're going to jump into the next verse. Where is your wife Sarah? They asked him. We're in verse 9. There in the tent, he said. This is the first time we really see. Then the Lord said, so now it becomes revealed to Abraham and Sarah by things he's promising, by things he knows about them. They're beginning to understand this is Jehovah. Now listen, you probably relate to Abraham. Abraham didn't grow up in a Christian church. Abraham didn't have that experience with God. He grew up in a family, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, God says, hey, follow me. And Abraham's like, okay, where are we going? He's like, I'll tell you later. Come on. And if you relate to that, you say, I didn't really grow up in church. This wasn't really a thing I had. But God called me, and I began to follow him, and that's the journey I'm on. That's Abraham's journey too. So when God came down, and he said, I'm going to appear to Abraham, he's really wanting to reveal himself and to teach Abraham who he is. And that happens in this presence, right? That happens with this growth. So now it's saying, yeah, okay, this is God. This is Jehovah. So what do we learn from that? The first thing we learn, verse 10, then the Lord, so now it's revealed, Jehovah said, I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, will have a son. I'm going to give you 6 things to help you know when you're in the presence of the Lord. If this isn't your church family, we'd love for it to be, but if it's not, that's okay. You need to know, like when I'm in a church, how do I recognize the Lord's presence? What happens in the Lord's presence? When I'm in my own spiritual time with God, what are the signs that I'm in the Lord's presence? And here's some of them. It's not an exhaustive list, but it's an easy list to get. The first one is God's promises are spoken. Good things are spoken over you. Because if you're hearing guilt still and you're a follower of Jesus, that ain't God. That's not the presence of the Lord. That's not the kind of church you need to be a part of, because that's not where the presence of the Lord is. Because we know Romans 8 tells us, for now there is no condemnation to those who belong to Christ Jesus. So we stand completely forgiven, and good things are spoken over us. In fact, God says, I sing songs of deliverance over you. When I hear that verse spoken to me, I almost think of God like dancing around me in a circle, like singing songs of deliverance over me. And boy, who needed that this week, right? That's the presence of the Lord. That's the number one way you recognize when good things are spoken over you. Hey, you messed up this week. Is that where God wants you to live? He wants you to say sorry and get over it. He already paid for that. Put yourself back in the game. Don't let that trip you up. Good things are spoken in the presence of the Lord, and that's what we see here. Remember, this is Sarah. She'd given her handmaiden to Abraham, and he had a baby with her. I mean, it was messed up. And still, the presence of the Lord spoke good things over Abraham and Sarah. So that's one. So if you're writing it down, which I'm just saying you probably should, that's the first thing that you should write down. Then, now Sarah was listening at the entrance to the tent, which was behind him. Verse 11. Abraham and Sarah were already old and well advanced in years, and Sarah was just past the age of childbearing. I'm going to turn 40 in July. And I would really hate for God to speak this promise over me right now. But Sarah was happy and excited about that. So Sarah laughed to herself. She thought, after I'm worn out and my master is old, will I now have this pleasure? That's the key word she said. Will I now have this pleasure of having a baby? Then the Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh and say, will I really have a child now that I am old? Verse 14, this is a key phrase. Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have a son. Second way you know that you're in the presence of the Lord is that your faith is going to be challenged. When I'm in my quiet time at home with God, if it's all roses and I'm not challenged, if my doubt isn't constantly being confronted, I'm probably not in the presence of the Lord. Because to experience the presence of the Lord, my faith is challenged. He says, look at your circumstances. Is this too hard for me, Amanda? If you're in a church, they should be saying, hey, nothing's impossible with God. That's the presence of the Lord. So that's number two. The third thing we see in the presence of the Lord, I love this. Sarah was afraid, verse 15. So she lied and said, I did not laugh. This is the great Mother's Day talk right here. I'm lying to God. Sarah was afraid, so she lied and said, I did not laugh. But he said, yes, you did laugh. Third thing we know in the presence of the Lord, your lies are going to be confronted. The lies that come at you all the time that say, you can't, you're not enough. Why are you even trying? You can't do this. Everybody else tells you can't do this. You can't do this. Those lies get confronted when we get in the presence of the Lord. In a good relationship, in a friendship that's holy, lies will get confronted. That's the presence of the Lord here. Sarah's lies are being confronted. How many of us need some lies confronted every day? Right? I wake up, I start hearing the lies. If I don't get myself connected to the presence of the Lord that's already there, but I need to connect with him, then those lies don't get confronted, and my day goes downhill very quickly because that's all I'm hearing is the negatives about myself and my situation and my family and those around me. How about you? The next thing that happens in the presence of the Lord. Let's keep reading. When the men get up to leave, they look down toward Sodom, and Abraham walked along with them to see them on their way. And then the Lord said, I love this part, you guys. This is important. Shall I hide this from Abraham what I'm about to do? Abraham will surely become a great and powerful nation, and all nations on earth will be blessed through him. For I've chosen him, so he will direct his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just, so that the Lord will bring about for Abraham what he has promised him. What is this? God says, I've got a secret. Got a secret. Should I share it with Abraham? But see, Abraham's already stepped into the presence of the Lord. He's been serving. He's been standing near. And God starts saying, I've got some secrets. You know, some of you have need of answers you haven't even asked God yet for. Where do you hear those whispers from God? In the presence of the Lord. He whispers secrets about your future, about friends, about people that aren't good for you, but you keep having them in your life. But when you're in the presence of the Lord, he says, psst, I got a secret for you. That's what he does with Abraham. He says, psst, hey, I've got something that's about to happen, and I'm thinking about telling you. And then he does. How cool is that? That's the next thing. When you're in the presence of the Lord, you'll hear from God, and he whispers secrets to you. This is a truth. Whatever you serve, you will share secrets with. You're like, what? Abraham served these people, ended up serving God, and he got God's secrets. If you're serving pornography, you'll have secrets with pornography. If you're serving alcohol as a problem, you'll share secrets with alcohol. How do you know when things are a problem? Oh, when there's a secret around it. Hey, mommies, when you know you have a shopping master and that you're serving is when you're lying about how much you're spending. Because you just shared a secret with shopping. You see what I'm saying? You share secrets with whatever you're serving. Abraham served God and got his secrets. That's the good kind of secrets. That's how you know you're in the presence of the Lord. The next one. So then the Lord says in verse 20, the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great and their sin so grievous that I will go down and see if what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me. And if not, I will know. Verse 22, the men turned away and went toward Sodom, but Abraham, I love the way it's worded, but Abraham remained standing before the Lord. Then Abraham approached him and said, will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked? Basically, God says, hey, these people are doomed. Abraham's response tells you he's in the presence of the Lord. Because sometimes I'm like, good, they deserve it. Right? Finally, God, get him! Right? Abraham's been in the presence of the Lord, and what's his response? I've got a burden for these people. Don't do this, God. Don't do this. What can we do? What can we do, God? How can we reach these doomed people? If you want to know if you've been in the presence of the Lord, how's your heart for those people who are condemned? How's your heart for people we would call lost? I'll tell you how you'll know. Your prayer list. Will your prayer list affect somebody's eternity? That's a good gut check for growth. If I'm growing in grace, if I'm growing in Jesus Christ, then my prayer list has to do with other people's eternities. And that's Abraham. He's been in the presence of the Lord, and he has a burden for people who are doomed. And then it affects things. Let's keep reading. Then Abraham, approached him. Will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked? Verse 24. What if there are 50 righteous people in the city? Will you really sweep it away and not spare the place for the sake of 50 righteous people in it? He begins to pray for Sodom and Gomorrah. He begins to say, okay, God, what about 50? If we could find 50 righteous people, are you going to get rid of Sodom and Gomorrah? And God's like, okay, I'll spare them if I can find 50 righteous people. And I love this about Abraham because I'm not so good at this. Abraham's like, okay, what about 45? Will you spare him if we can find 45? And Abraham continues to pray. 6 times he asks God. He keeps going down until it's only 10. Only need of 10. What's the truth to be found here? Is when you stand in the Lord's presence, your prayers get answered. You're like, that's a tough one sometimes with us because we're always like, No, I've had some prayers not answered, so I don't know about that. But see, when I stand in the presence, when I'm like Abraham and I'm standing under the tree, I'm near God, then my heartbeat begins to beat with God. It changes my prayers. God's heart was not to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. Newsflash. And Abraham's heartbeat began to beat with God's, and his prayers began to match the heartbeat of God, and his prayers got answered. If you want to know if you're in the presence of the Lord, if you want to know if you found a good church family, a good Radius home, a good home group, wherever you are, a good friendship, your prayers get answered. There's a heartbeat moment with God in that space, and prayers are prayed that match the heartbeat of God, and he answers them. So that's 6 ways to know you're in the presence of the Lord, because as we grow, we have to have gut checks. How do I know if I'm growing? And I often think of like love, joy, peace, the fruit of the Spirit, but tell you the truth, sometimes those are intangible to me. Like, am I being joyful? Like, I can overanalyze the stink out of that, you know? Am I being really loved? Am I really peaceful? I can overanalyze that, but here's some real tangible things. Some real things that still speak to the fruit of the Spirit, and it's right out of the story of Abraham. Am I standing in the presence of the Lord? These are gut check growth moments. And yet we come back to how? Yes, I want all these things in my life, right? As you heard the 6, you're like, I want to hear whispers from God. Yeah. Right? I want to have all those lies confronted. I want to have good things spoken over me. So we hear all those things and we're like, yes, yes, please, let's get some of that. Let's refresh back to the beginning. What was Abraham doing? He was serving. As he served others, he was serving God. See, often we minimize this. We say, I've heard people in the church, and I know some of you have heard many people in the church say, yeah, but you better hand him a tract. You better tell him Jesus. If you're going to give him something, you better give him Jesus too. You know, Abraham served. Abraham served because it's not just about others. It's about me needing to serve. That's part of my growth. You see, at Radius, we're always like, hey, you should serve on Rad Kids. Hey, you should serve in setup. Hey, you should serve in worship and production, I think is the next serve team meeting. And you're like, oh, the church needs me to serve. No, you need to serve. You need to be in the presence of the Lord. This is an avenue that helps you do it. We got people every week who help serve strangers, just like Abraham. They serve them meals every week, and they need help. How are we doing that? Not just because, look, we're not fixing the crisis that St. Pete has with the needy in our community. What we're saying is we want to welcome the presence of the Lord in our life and in this church life and in this community, and so we serve. We serve. We need you to get involved, not because we need it, because we want to see God grow. We want to see the presence of the Lord be so thick and heavy in this church and in this city that lives are transformed just by being near. Just like how Sarah and the servant, they got a blessing. Sarah got good things spoken over her. Her lies got confronted. The servant was in the presence of God just because they were included in serving. Isn't that powerful? So as we close out today, I kind of wanted to just take a second, because right here, right now, God is in this place. Every week when I pray over this gathering, I don't get to pray every week over the gathering, but when I get to, I'm always like, Lord, I know you're here. May I sense you. May I connect to you, right? Wherever you are in life, at your workplace, in your car, God is there. You don't have to work to find him. He says, if you seek me, you'll find me. It's like, okay, check, you got it. If you're looking for me, I'm going to be there because I'm everywhere. Now, how do I connect so my life changes? One way. Like Blake talked about prayer last week. If you missed it, you should go on YouTube and watch it. And this week, we're talking about serving. Serve here. Serve in your community. Serve those around you. If you'll close your eyes and bow your head.